All right. Listen, it is that time again, fellas. We are in the barbershop. We have some great conversation for you guys today. I am blessed and extremely excited to share this platform with two of my best friends, cats that I know understand what it means to heal and to also help. And so I'm excited because they're going to share with you a little bit more of what I've considered this parenting conversation from the male's perspective. The dads who've operated from outside of the home, but not outside of the parenting or fatherhood mantra, and carry that mantra well. So coming to us today with me will be one of my friends. Oh gosh, we go back quite a few years now. I don't want to date us too far back. He's an elder statesman to me, but he and I have been friends for probably since the early '90s. Brother Calvin Thomas, and ironically, I had an opportunity to take a stint of working alongside his son years back when I worked at Isles with my brother Andre Thomas, both two passionate brothers, both who were excited about serving, and I'm excited to hear their stories and testimonies tonight. So I'm going to give you both an opportunity to just share a little bit about you, and then we're going to get right into the meat of things. So we'll start with Calvin.
Okay, hi. Well, this has been a pleasure to have this opportunity, and I just want to thank you, Ned, for inviting me and my son. I'm a native Trentonian. I'm an old head, so my story with my son began back in the late '60s, early '70s, and as you know, I met his mom when I was in ninth grade, and that's a significant year for me. She was my first sweetheart, my first love. We were young and emotional, and dated through high school. And subsequently, or consequently, she became pregnant while we were in the 11th grade. And my son was actually born when I was still in 11th grade, the June of my 11th grade year. So I became a father at a really early age.
Wow.
And as a teenage father, I had no clue other than the
Mm.
fact that I made a child. Um, but thank God my family and Andre's mother's family were very close, and without their support during our 12th grade year, I don't know what we would have done.
Wow.
But I just say that Andre was basically parented by not just his mother and me, and I was a parent outside the home, but he was raised by a whole slew of folks within both of our families that really took up the slack.
Awesome. 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 I like that. That's that true village.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Dre, share a little bit, man. Give us
Sure.
a snapshot of the bio.
Okay, Andre Thomas. I currently work at Isles as a senior training manager. I'm also a life skills coach with the Trenton Circus Squad, and my dad and I also run a program for ninth graders and also alumni, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders called Healthy Relationship, Healthy Choices. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, listen, man, I appreciate both of you guys, man. And already off the bat, man, there's a couple of nuggets that y'all dropped that I want to definitely kind of like chime in about. And I'm gonna flip this towards Calvin first, and then this is gonna come to you, Andre. But Calvin, you mentioned that you were a teen father, right? So I don't have that moment of, because when my first child was born, I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what was it like being a teen dad? Like, I mean, that first time you're a father is the scariest thing on the planet. I can't even imagine what it might have been like as a teenager having that news dropped on you. Share a little bit about what it was being a teen father.
Well, we're going back 52 years. So this was a different time, a different, era. It was during the civil rights, marches. And
Mhm.
so it was a different climate. And, um, you know, it's hard to remember exactly what I was feeling. All I know is that it was awkward for me being in high school, Trenton Central High School, as a father, and not really knowing what that meant. Other than the fact that I made a child. And so part of it was I was proud to say, yeah, I'm a father. But at the same time, I was scared because I didn't have a clue, what the long-term ramifications of that was. And I have to really mention that when Andre's mother, parents came by my house to talk to my parents about the fact that their daughter was pregnant, um, you know, I kind of knew when she came over because Andre's mother had already shared with me that she thought she was pregnant, and I just knew that this was the moment where everything was just going to go
It was all
crazy.
about to hit the fan.
But I was amazed that my mother and father and her mother and father were very they didn't go off the handle. They were
Okay.
really kind of, they said, okay, well, what are you guys going to do? My father took me aside and says, well, now you got the responsibility. So he kind of gave me this conversation as a man to man. And I was floored by that because I thought that I was going to get on punishment. I thought I was going to get a beating. I thought I was going to, but it was totally opposite of what I thought was going to happen. And because of their response, it made that experience a lot more manageable. And it wasn't as burdensome because we had their support. I had my
That's
mom
good.
and dad's support. I used to fear Andre's mother's father because he was kind of big and tall, and I used to always fear him, even though he was always nice to me. So I think the first thing that I thought about was like, oh, I got to face this guy. And
You coming to
he
get me?
treated me, he
Yeah.
treated me like a son.
Nice.
And so, because of that, it wasn't that traumatic, oh my God, you've shamed us, you've embarrassed us. And so I would say because of how it began, it made the journey through parenthood a lot easier.
Right.
Wow. Wow. So thank you. So that leads me to another question for you, Calvin. Given the fact that that was the introduction for you into parenting, into fatherhood, how did that influence or impact your ability to do the parenting piece?
Well, I had to learn as I went. First of
Mhm.
all, I never, I was an outside of the house parent, still living at home, and she was still living at home.
Right.
After I graduated from high school, my father wanted me to work because I had to support this child, my son Andre, and so I was already working after school anyway, during high school. So I just transitioned from part time to full time work,
Wow.
but a year after I got out of high school, it was during the end of the Vietnam War. It wasn't over, but it was towards the end, and they were still drafting. And my lottery number for the draft came up, and so I didn't want to go into the Army infantry to go to Vietnam to fight. So I ended up joining the Navy, which was something my father did when he was a
Okay.
teenager. So I joined the Navy to kind of avoid going into the Army, knowing I was going to get drafted. So it wasn't a choice, but it was something that I had to
Gave you an
do.
alternative.
It was an alternative. And so Andre's first 5 years, um, I was stationed in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, going on multiple deployments overseas, 6 months at a time. And so I did not really have the opportunity to spend that bonding time with Andre that I wish I could have. And so that played a big part on, our relationship as when I finally did have that opportunity. And I always told Andre that when my 4 years in the Navy was up, and I had an opportunity to re-enlist. I told my commanding officer that I would only re-enlist if they could station me in Trenton. And they found a
It's
way
huge.
to get me assigned to the Philadelphia Recruiting District. And I was assigned to the Trenton Navy Recruiting Office on East State and Carroll Street, the same place that I enlisted. And so I then had the opportunity now living in Trenton, working in Trenton in the Navy in uniform to really connect to Andre.
Wow.
We probably spent more time together during those years. He was about 6 years old now. Then we spent the first 6 years, and
Wow.
only because of my family helping to raise him in my absence when I wasn't in town. It was still this sense of bond that we had. So I have to really thank my family for developing that bond with Andre in my
In
absence.
your absence.
That was like that extension of me, so that when I was finally there in prison,
Right.
it had
There
a
was a
great
foundation
start.
to build off of. That is great. Dre, share a little bit about what that transition for you meant. Like, I mean, I know you were young back then,
Right.
but to have dad now back in your
Well,
visible.
I still got great memories of my dad. I can remember, as he was talking, I can remember him riding around with me, and he kept looking at me. I still remember that he kept looking at me, and he was like a proud dad, like, I made that. That's my little man. I can remember those moments. I can remember when he was my baseball coach. I can remember going over his house, spending weekends with him, and at the end of the football games, we would watch 60 Minutes before he took me home. So those memories are still very vivid. And even when I watch 60 Minutes today, it's a little nostalgic for me because he was present in my life, even though he didn't live with me, he was still present. And, and I was real prideful of my dad, So yeah, I remember having a real good childhood.
Awesome. So I know you and I and Cal, we've talked a little bit prior to today, which is, and I'll be honest, it's not the norm for how we operate on the barbershop, but it was really good for me because it gave me an opportunity to kind of get some insight to know how to talk to you guys today. And so I was thankful for yesterday's conversation. And one of the things that you shared with me, or both of you shared with me yesterday, and I'm going to steal this because I was blown away by Calvin sent me a picture of you guys when he coached you at West End Little League. And so I was like, because I'm a Trentonian, I'm looking at that photo and remember those images in the background of what West End Little League looked like back then. What was that experience like? Because I mean, I know that in that there was some dynamics that were added to that, which aren't the norm. Like your dad was your coach, but there were also some other folks who were part of that coaching process, and there were some relationships that grew stronger from that, I believe.
Yeah, well, I think in that photo was not only I was his coach, but his stepdad was also the assistant coach.
That's right.
And his mother and I, because we were teenage parents, trying to figure out how to manage, we were always friends. Even though we fell out of love because we were teenagers anyway, it was teenage love. So as we, start to mature, we fell out of love, but we were always friends. And so we always had this co-parenting ability because, we were always friends. So when she finally got married, to Andre's stepdad, it was just an extension of, okay, now there's another person that he could talk to. And so I never really felt insecure to where even if he would have called his stepdad dad, that would not have bothered me because I know that I was his dad. So when his stepdad offered to assistant, coach on the team, I said, no problem. So his mom would come to the games. And so, we had his mom in the stands, his stepdad and his dad coaching him. And, I think, for me,
wow,
it was just so mature. I can't describe it, but it was so mature because I never really felt insecure about, trying to compete against him as him being the stepdad, because I knew that Andre knew his family, he knew my family, he knew me, and so I just think that really was probably the best that we could have done for Andre, to kind of model that we all love you, and there is no conflicts here. There's no conflicts at all. So I don't think Andre ever saw me argue with his mother.
Right. Never.
Wow.
And I never ever talked bad about her, to Andre, and I don't believe that she ever talked bad about me. Even though we went separate ways in our life, we remained mature and friends, and I think that was really a great foundation for Andre.
Awesome. So Dre, how was that, man? Even just as a parent, as a child, how does that hearing that that your dad and your mom put you first is what basically I'm hearing. Like their whole perspective was like, hey, it ain't about me, it's all about making sure that Andre is good.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I felt I had a great childhood, and I look back at that, no complaints, I always had, and I think when it started getting more challenging is when our family kind of expanded and I became a teenager, and that's when things started to change, and it kind of, a different dynamic aroused, and that, and as we do programs for young people today, it goes to show you that, no matter what foundation you have, when you go out in that world, it's not a guarantee that things won't happen, that life won't happen. And I began to hang out with my friends and hang out with family members who were into street stuff. And that became more influential at that time of my life, because as a teenager, you're very influential. And I had, I saw gaps where I could get out and do what I wanted to do. And, things started to change as I got older.
And I just want to add to that, to where, for me, that was the most challenging, when I began to kind of lose my influence over him, because, he was out with his friends. And in those moments, I used to always sit back and reflect on what I could have done differently, and I started to really now think that, if I would have married his mom and been in the home, and been there for him when he was younger, that might have made a difference. And so I was trying to figure out, like, why would he go and do some things that he he shouldn't be doing. And so that was for me the guilt years. I felt like
beat yourself up here, right?
I could have done different things differently. I could have been there for him. But I can say that, and Andre can probably talk more about that. I never put pressure on him, or made him feel like he was a bad child, And so when he got on his mom's nerves, she would always go, okay, she would call and says, you need to talk to your son.
Talk to him.
And so I would pick him up, we would ride around, and I give him the, the father talk, and, and, he would listen. But it was always from this perspective of, let me give you something that you can use, if not now, later.
Right.
And so it wasn't trying to make him, I wasn't trying to belittle him. It was really trying to talk to him, in a way where, he might listen, but at least, I'm not going to make him not want to talk to me.
Right.
That's important. That is huge. That is huge. So, Dre, let me ask this. I'm going to do a follow-up to what you were sharing, man. And Calvin, thank you for sharing that part. In that time where those teen years, right? And I mean, as we're doing this dialogue, what pops into my mind is, there's probably some young brother, some parent, some dad who's on this line right now, listening and saying, that's the world I'm in right now.
Right.
Or that's the space I'm in today. What, just so that we can have some perspective, and then we can talk about some resolution.
Right.
what were some of the draws to make a young teenage boy like yourself travel into those influences? Because I mean, they're always out there. They're still there. We both know that.
Absolutely.
So what are some pitfalls that caught you or trapped you when you were coming through that stage?
It's like, man, you know, working with young people today, you begin to understand that no matter, even because my dad was in my life, but at the same time, my mom was running the household, so she was working. So I had a gap of time after school where I had no supervision. And, you know, it's just, I was in that stage in my life where your friends become more important, you know, and as I look at teenage development, that's just a natural thing. And if you're in an environment where things are normalized, like, you know, selling drugs or doing drugs, it is normalized, you're going to experiment and you're going to try to fit in to that world. And then as a, you know, your young mind, you embrace things that has long-term consequences. And at the moment, you don't understand the consequence of it. So you kind of get into it. And if you have other influences in your life that you know, it's just that you're attracted to in your youthful mind, you know, it's just hard to stop. No matter what my dad did, no matter what my mom said, you know, I was going to make choices that I thought was right at the time. And that's why, you know, the guilt, you know, my dad didn't have to it really wasn't on him, you know, because what was going to happen was going to happen. And, you know, he couldn't stop it and my mom couldn't stop it because it was a reality in growing up in Trenton. And, you know, so I just think that it was a normal transgression and, you know, but at the same time, as I started to hit these pitfalls, you know, the things that were seeds that were planted, you know, those experiences I had were still very, you know, vivid in my life. And I would reference to those things. And I realized that I had a foundation that some of my peers may not have had.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So creating that foundation for our young brothers is important.
It's
and
important.
We all know that as parents.
Teach no matter what. Teach no matter what.
There's always a teaching moment every day. Yeah. And so one of the things that Calvin had shared, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about it, if you can, Calvin, for me, when Andre was going through that time of his life where he was trying to identify who he was and what he represented and, you know, standing against the grain and probably in a lot of ways, how did you interact with him? How did you manage that?
Well, it was, you know, I guess a part of it was, you know, see, I was a recruiter for the Navy. So I was working with other young guys in high school age level, you know, helping them map their future. And so I kind of took that same approach with Andre when I was with him to where, you know, let me try to coach you through your situation and only give you some advice. And having to really let go of if you don't take my advice, then that's on you. So it's something, you know, even though I was struggling from within that, man, I should be doing more, you know, there was a part of me that says, you know, I can't, you know, strangle him into submission. I just kind of have to kind of give him some guidance and accept the fact that he may fail. Right. You know, he may fail and live with that. So I think that for me, it was looking more long-term to where if I can just continue to coach him and guide him and let him fail and then say, okay, so, well, you know, you are where you are. Why do you think you are where you are? Right. You know, what could you do differently? So it was more of a coaching him. And at the time, he wasn't coachable because he already had his own mindset. Right. But when he became coachable, you know, I mean, it was like the best relationship, you know, because now, like, I have a player that's willing to, you know, that wants to be coached. He's actually asking me good questions. Right. And he's actually, you know, he's curious about some things. Right. And I can tell you those moments, you know, in his development where we connected. Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dre. You're about to say something.
Because I had to, you know, eventually, because my dad was sort of, I always call him the patient farmer. And because I was that hard bamboo seed that he constantly just watered, he didn't pressure. You're like a farmer, you're not going to go in the ground and see what's happening with that seed. Like, why you're not producing? You just got to keep watering the seed. And sort of, you mentioned coaching. And Ned, from sports, that's the burden of the coach, because you can only try to engage the players, with your experience and your roadmap. But at the end of the day, you can't go out in the court and play for them. And like my dad, he couldn't live my life for me. All he could do was coach and hope that eventually I would get it. And because he coached, his style of coaching really paid off, because eventually when I got into real trouble, and if you're in those streets, eventually you're gonna hit that brick wall, and then now he had my attention, because all of those things, all those seeds he planted began to take root. And I began to start having a vision for myself. And that's when I really started to lean on him. And he fed me when I was ready to eat. And we still got letters. I still have the letters that I used to write, and he kept them and gave them to me. And you could look at the letters, you could see a progression when I was in
progression in your mindset.
You could see the progression, the maturity. But it happened in my time. So I want to tell all the dads, like, it happens in the time of the youth. You can't force behavior. You can't, all you got to do is be who you are, be an example. And every now and then, throw out the olive branch, check in and try to coach, but give them space to make decisions. And eventually, God willing, those seeds will take root, and then you can begin to now coach on another level.
Because I tell you, my best coaching for Andre was when he was in prison, because he was then at the point of his life when he was ready to listen. He wanted to learn. I fed him books, and I visit him every week, and we would sit and talk. And I always kind of use this analogy to where I was so focused on trying to build the future, and I could not let him distract me into staying in my past or the present. So there was times when I remember when his mom said, "Andre, you're gonna go live with your dad." And I kind of said, well, he's not going to bring all that mess to my house. So I rode him around and said, Andre, I tell you what, I got a plan for you. I'm going to take you to the rescue mission. They will take you in, and you will work for your room and board.
Wow.
And this is something I think that you need to, So I remember taking him to rescue mission. He got out my car. I drove off. I looked in the rearview mirror, and he was walking the opposite direction. So I said, like, okay,
he's not ready.
I could turn around and go pick him back up. But I said, no, let him go and find that next hole to fall in, and figure out how to get out of it again. Because it was like, if I put all my energy on trying to rescue him, I would not have built the future for him and for me.
Yes, right.
You
would have created a dependent.
Yes, I could not let him be that kind of distraction. So coaching is like, okay, when you're coachable, I'll use you. In the meantime, sit on the sideline.
There you go.
Absolutely.
And it's so funny, but that is an accurate assessment, Calvin, because I think a lot of times as a parent, a lot of us try to fix everything for our children. We're always ready to just, hey, let me jump in and get that right for you. When sometimes going through that sacrifice and that struggle is what builds the character. It's what gives them the maturity.
That's right. And his style made me a very independent person, because even in my days in the street, I got my own little apartment, and I just was I was just using some of the foundational things he told me. I was just using it the wrong way. And even those plans, of course, still crumbled, and I can remember, being in the streets and living with my mom. I had this safety net, but the minute, my mom put me out and I got an apartment, I always tell the story to the youth when I'm teaching. It's like, that's when the game for me changed. It became very stressful. it was no longer just fun. It became a life choice that I had to live with.
Had to do.
It wasn't always fun. It may look like fun on the outside, but on the inside, it was always struggling and things pulling at me. And it leads you down a lot of dark roads because you're dealing with the stress that people don't know you're dealing with.
The grind changes.
The grind changes. It changed, you know, and it was just like, man, this is really not as glamorous as I thought it would be. You know, I ran into all sorts of pitfalls, you know, but my dad let me fall so that he realized that, okay, you're going to put your emphasis on the street. Let me see if the streets can hold you down. And of course it didn't. So that had to happen though, in order for me to realize my future. I had to fail at the streets in order to achieve what I have today. And he let me fail in the streets. And I think that was the best thing he could have did for me, was let me fail in those streets so that when, you know, when I finally hit rock bottom, it was like, okay, now there's no way but up. And I had to have that experience. And sometimes you can't rob people of that experience, because then you become an enabler, and then they'll get a sense of entitlement, and that sense of entitlement becomes a thief of hard work. And you know, but my dad kind of forced me to figure it out, and that made me a very independent adult.
Yeah, and I tell you, he was so independent when he got out of prison. He was 27, right, Andre? You're 27?
28.
28. And for the first time, he lived with me. I mean, you know, he actually lived with me, because when he came out of prison, I told his mom he's going to stay with me, and she said, "Oh yeah, he's definitely going to stay with you, because you know." And so, you know, he moved in with me, and I'm ex-military, you know, retired Navy. So I had, I had my ways. I says, okay,
your structure.
Here's the structure. And because he had this prison background, you know, he already had some structure as well. He had some disciplines. So we actually, you know, it was the most pleasant experience living with him, because we had the same disciplines. You know, we were both neat freaks. We were both, you know, we both put things back in order. We both had schedules that we adhered to. So it was like a well-oiled machine, him and I, you know, and we also enjoyed the same TV shows. So it was so pleasant for me that 90 days into this relationship, he comes to me and says, "Dad, I'm thinking about getting my own apartment." And I was like, "No, you can't. Please leave me."
It's like, where you going?
Yeah, where you gonna go? And I said, "Wow, you know, I don't want him to leave." Years ago, I didn't want him to come into my house. Because of all the stuff he was doing. And now I'm like, wow. Cow. But that's when I knew he had transformed. He had transformed because it was like living with, you know, it was like living with me.
Yeah.
Well, he was you.
He was me.
And that was
an extension of you.
Yeah. And that was for me.
Crazy.
That was the moment where I knew that I had arrived. When I was able to survive under his regiments, I knew that I was ready for the world, you know, so to speak. And you know, and life still happens. You know, when I look back and I reflect on even decisions I made after that, you know, I look back and I realize I wish I would have been more outward with some of the things I still struggle with. You know, even outside of prison with relationships and stuff like that, you know, I still had this mentality of I'm going to carry my load, and I wouldn't always express some of my struggles, and it led me down, you know, bad relationships, you know, and things of that nature. And now in hindsight, you know, I wish I'd have been more open with him with some of the things I struggle with. You know, I think I would have had different outcomes even after prison, but it was a teaching moment.
That is awesome. Listen, man, I appreciate the candidacy and the transparency that you guys are offering out this evening. One of the things that I've heard you guys both say, and I'm always using sports analogies with everything I talk about, not just because of the fact that I've played and I've coached, but it's so relevant sometimes to life experiences when you think about athletics. And you guys both use the reference of coaching, and your style of parenting. And so I know that you guys have something that I don't have right now in my scope, and that's the fact that there's 3 generations of the Thomas family. Because Andre, you're a dad now, and so, you know, how does that work? I mean, I know, I always think about the stuff that my dad poured into me and how, I've filtered through most of it. some
Right,
of it applied, some of it you let fly,
right.
and you establish your own realm of coaching style,
Sure.
or next generation coaching. How has it been, Alvin? I mean, Andre, for you transitioning from being the son to now being dad?
Well, that's a great question there, because I've also suffered the guilt trip of, if I would have stayed with his mother, would their lives be different? You
Right, right.
always have that guilt of, what would have happened if I would have been in the household, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I have to reflect on my childhood as well. Even though my dad didn't live in the house, he was still present in my life, and that was important. And I think that's critical, because I know people that grew up in two-family households. It don't really make a difference. It's really still up to the kid, and the environment they're living in plays a big
Yeah.
part. So, no matter how you lay the foundation, what's going to happen is going to happen. And so that kind of relieves me of some of the guilt. And I also, some of my dad's coaching style with my son, I don't pressure him. I allow him to be who he is. And just like my dad and I relationship evolved, I know my son and my relationship will evolve. And my son is sort of like my dad and myself. He's sort of a loner. He's not, he kind of, he walks in his own little silo, and, but he'll always check in every now and then and let us know he's doing okay. He's good.
Right.
But I don't like to force that relationship. I want it to happen organically. He knows I'm here, like my dad knew, like I knew my dad was there. And
Right.
I always tell his mother that our relationship will evolve in due time. I don't want to force it. I want him to, allow him to grow and be who he needs to be, and know that I'm here. And he knows that, So I definitely, I use some of my dad's parenting skills where that is relayed.
And prior to the pandemic in 2020, right before March 2020, we were actually meeting on a regular basis. Andre, Andre Jr. and I, for breakfast or lunch in Burlington,
Nice.
to talk about, I was trying to help him begin to map out his future. This is my grandson.
Okay.
Because he was thinking about going into the Air Force, but I was really, helping him understand how to manage money, And so it was really a chance for me to help him understand that, okay, you're at this year of earning. It's not so much how much you earn, it's how you manage what you earn. So we spent some time together doing some financial management over lunch, and then COVID hit, and so we
threw that off,
tried to do it through the video, but now with AJ, he'll be 20.
Yeah, he'll be 20 this year.
He'll be 20
December 2nd.
Yep, and so he's at that stage where he likes to be independent.
Yeah.
And so I think so I don't pressure him, as a grandson, because I have a different relationship with my granddaughters that is totally different than with my grandson. And so I'm glad to hear that Andre doesn't pressure him. And, I always believe that if you're going to struggle with your kids, the struggle has a purpose. And if you struggle with the foundation of love and empathy, that struggle will have an ultimate outcome. It will have a successful outcome. If you struggle in frustration and struggle in judgment, struggle in, trying to put someone down,
right, or force someone to be,
then that struggle will only end up in hate and separation.
Right.
Yeah. So it's how you manage those difficult moments that will determine, the long-term relationship.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, as a dad myself, one of my big pieces is with my sons. I always tell folks often, and I said it even in when he was on with me on the platform, that it was important for me to just be the guiding light for him. live my life by example, and then allow him to understand how to critically navigate this thing called life. Not trying to point the direction for him because it's his path.
That's right.
I walked mine. I still walk mine. He has to walk his. Now, if he chooses to follow mine, then again, it's my responsibility to say, hey, here are the areas to look out for.
Right.
Ultimately, you know, as a parent, at least for me, my desire was to say, son, I want you to learn how to walk your path. You know, blaze your own way, and then understand that this is, you know, what you need to do and how you need to do, in the sense of processing and assessing where you are and where you need to go. And I think when we do that as a parent, particularly as dads, that helps more than we could ever imagine, because we're basically giving them the tools to complete a task, as opposed to just saying to them, go do the task and not show them how to use the tools.
That's right.
And so that's huge. I'm excited because I did this late in the game. And so when I heard you saying, Calvin, that you guys were talking financial literacy with your grandson, with him, helping him understand how to manage the finances of his life, that's huge. You know, my oldest boy will be 23 coming up in the new year. And so we started about a year or 2 years ago really talking about it. And I think I was late. I was well beyond the time I should have been doing that. But it's so important to give them that understanding, that knowledge, so that they can navigate through life in every area well, whether it's finances, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in, you know, how they conduct themselves in any arena. I think that's crucial, because, you know, as this world evolves, so does our involvement in it.
Yes.
And our kids need to understand, our sons and daughters need to understand, how do I manage these different arenas that I might find myself in?
Right.
Like, it's not just going, listen, you ain't always going to be in the hood. It's good to know how to operate yourself in the hood, but you really need to understand, how am I going to operate when I'm on that college campus? How do I operate when I'm in the work world, or when I'm out in an interview, or when I'm trying to present a proposal for a possible, you know, program that I'm doing? They need to have that diversity. And I think that's really big for us as parents, to be able to help them understand that.
And my message to fathers or parents, you know, with kids, is that the more that you have these kind of conversations with your child, the better off they're going to be in the long run. And stop having conversations about petty stuff. Why are you doing that? Why you look like that? You know, we get so caught up in the petty stuff, and that all it does is create arguments and anxiety. It's like, have
your battles
about meaningful things
that
are going to lay a path to something long term, and get out of the present all the time.
And pick your battles. And also my message to fathers is, you don't have to be, you're never going to be the perfect parent. And it's okay. It's okay. You're not going to be, we're still human beings. We make mistakes.
Yes.
I wish I could have did this differently. I wish I could, that's just human. And you're never going to be perfect parent. But sometimes we'll guilt ourselves because we wanted to be the perfect parent. We wanted to be this way. But, our my son, my daughter, they all have to know that, I'm gonna do the best I can with what I have. And I'm here to always engage you. And I'll do the best at doing that. But, if you're looking for perfection, you need to look to God, because, you won't get perfection here, but you will get real. You will get real.
Yes.
You will get real,
Yes.
and you will get genuine care and love. And that's basically all you can do, and let life work the rest of it out.
Amen.
Yeah,
and stop trying to raise perfect kids.
That's right.
That's right. Our kids are not perfect. Our kids are human. Our kids will make multiple mistakes,
as
we do.
As we do, even in adulthood. So So stop striving for perfection.
Right.
Strive for love. I always say the foundation of everything is love. Is if your child loves you, and they know you love them, regardless of your shortcomings, then they're rich. They are rich. They're wealthy
beyond measure.
Beyond measure.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I think that's absolutely huge, Calvin. You're right. And Dre, to your point too, I think that if we stop putting so much emphasis on hey, we got to be this way, and just really live in understanding that I'm a human being, that I'm going to operate within the realms of what I have. I'm not going to go trying to, be something that I'm not or someone I'm not. That helps our children more than anything. And allowing them to see our failures helps them grow. Because, if I see the mistake as a youth, then I know not to follow that path or fall down that same trap.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to fall down the same rabbit hole my dad fell down if it was explained to me that it existed.
That's right.
It only happens when, when I think about this, and one of my big pieces, and I have this conversation with my sons often, is we're looking to destroy the generational curses that dwell in our family. And I had to say to them, I said, dude, in order for that to happen, I got to be transparent and explain and express to you every area that I fall short in, that I struggle in, my successes and my failures, so that you're able to navigate that differently. You know what I mean? Because the things that I might have struggled in or failed in doesn't necessarily mean you have to struggle or fail in those things if you know that they exist. And, it only happens when as some men do, we hide our stuff. We pretend that it doesn't happen, or we got this, we wearing our Superman, uniform under our clothes, and we're like, oh no, nothing happened. I'm dad. And real talk, your sons are looking at you like, no, my dad can do anything.
Right. Yeah.
And when he becomes that teenager and he realized like, he really just flesh and blood. That joker he was blowing smoke at me all this time.
Right. Yeah.
Now the rebellion becomes really ugly because they're looking at you like, man, you ain't who you said you were.
Right. Absolutely.
But if we paint the picture real and transparent, then we end up with a better relationship, long-term relationships with our sons that they understand, and they're more likely to come to you because you've shared, my dad said he struggled in the same area. Let me go holler at dad.
Absolutely.
My dad had these areas that he had successes in. I want those successes. Let me go holler at dad. And that's how we pass on the knowledge, and our ancestors always passed on the knowledge, and that's what we got to get back to as men, understanding how to do that the right way and in a healthy way. Listen, we could have this conversation, bro, all night long. I know that we could probably do this dialogue until the sun coming up. But I don't want to beat everybody in the head with this. I'd love to be able to do this conversation multiple times with the both of you. And so I'm extending the invitation to you guys to know that I would love us to get back together and continue this parenting conversation, but more importantly, to talk about, the realness that is necessary for brothers to start healing. Because there are so many other facets that spin off of this parent conversation that we're going to be touching as we move forward in the barbershop with this series. And I'd love you guys to be a part of that. I wanted to personally thank both of you for coming on, pulling the covers back and sharing your testimony, your story, your part of your journey. I know that, and because I know you personally, I know some of the things that you guys have been through, man. And I just want to say to you, big ups to both of you for how you're sewing back into the communities that you live in. You know what I mean? I see the impact that the young men that are part of your program are having, the successes that are happening, even in the ones that fail, they're still learning something because might not be today. They're that got my brain just went. They are the palm tree seed.
That's right.
And we just watered and we consistently keep an eye on because they're going to break through that soil at some point.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It might not happen today or tomorrow, but it's coming. But it starts because you guys did the work to get the soil ready to receive the seed. So continue to do what you guys are doing, man. Again, thank you so much, man, for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to close us out at this point. I know that you guys have an obligation to do some stuff after this, and I don't want to be disrespectful to your time. So thank you. Looking forward to dialoguing with you guys again. And to all of my listeners, folks who are on, who took the time to actually be a part of this process with us today, I thank you. I hope that you heard something that helped you. If you have a question or if you want some additional information, please do not hesitate to reach out to us here at Royalty Network Ministries or through the Barbershop Conversations. We were here for you. Our goal, our plan, our mission is always to do this journey together. It is not about one individual, but it is about the collective. All of us learning, growing from each other so that we can make it to a better place and be in a better way with it.
Amen.
So I thank everybody.
Amen.
Have a blessed evening. Take care of yourselves. Know that we love you, and we'll never stop helping each other grow. Take care.
Thank you.
Brother. Thank you, bro. Appreciate you, Ned. All right.